In an era of shifting global power, the world stands at a crossroads. Economic alliances are tested as new powers rise on the international stage. From the heart of Russia, revelations emerge at St. Petersburg Economic Forum, insights that challenge our understanding of economic isolation and global connectivity.
And participants were coming from 139 countries. It's very interesting to mention. Because as I had started before, allegedly isolated Russia from all over the world met with itself in Petersburg. But remember, we have 195 or 196 countries on our planet, and 139 of them participated. So 3/4 of the world participated in St. Petersburg, and only 1/4 of the world did not participate. So. And this 1/4 of the world, the G7, mostly and their allies or satellites or vessels, they spread through mass media because they control mass media in the West, that they were the center of the world. But I saw with my own eyes, I heard with my own ears that the opposite is true.
While traditional powers grapple with economic challenges and isolationist policies, a different story unfolds in Russia. Russia defies the narrative of economic solitude, often portrayed in the West.
So the West himself brought about this situation by his own stupid behavior, and Russia is now defending. Okay, I think it doesn't surprise anybody. And that Russia was forced into the embracement of China and was forced into the support by North Korea and Iran. It's also a result of the stupid Western behavior towards Russia during the last decades.
As the BRICS nations ascend, claiming an ever larger slice of the global economic pie, the question arises, is the era of Western economic dominance coming to an end?
Because nobody knows, or few people know, that 50 years ago, Henry Kissinger tied the US dollar to Saudi Arabian oil. That is what stabilized the US hegemony over the world. But this contract expired the 9th of June this year. This contract has expired after 50 years. It was not prolonged by the Saudis, and the Saudis turned their back to the West and joined the BRICS.
Are we witnessing the decline of American economic power? Is this the dawn of a new global era?
And okay, who is the West? Okay, let's start with defining who's the West. Unfortunately, there are some usurpers of power, of course, in the United States, and they have their vessels all over Europe who usurp power from the peoples. I don't see any representation of the interest of the American people by the guys on Capitol Hill. Nothing. Yeah. Or by this strange old man in the White House. They do not represent at all, nor the interest, neither the will of the American people. Usually American people, they want to have a good living, they want to have a better living for their children, they want to survive, they want to have fun in life. But what these power structures in Washington, as regard them, they are completely isolated from the will of the people. They are working for the financial American system. Everybody knows that the Federal Reserve Bank is owned by private family clients, and these private family clients, they dictate the policy of the United States, and further on they dictate the policy of the puppets in Berlin, in Brussels, and in Rome, and so on. That is what everything is about. The real West, the usual people, is good, but this representation of the West by these evil, dark political structures, this is not the West. So being a German, and you know me for some years, I'm really a radical Democrat in the good sense of the word.
Has Russia already won? Signs of American dominance in decline. Join us as we delve into these questions and uncover the undercurrents reshaping the world economy. Hello, Hans-Jörg. So thank you for being on our show today. And you had a very, very impressive weekend with the Economic Forum in Russia, St. Petersburg. Can you please give us an idea how that looked like?
It looked really impressive. So first of all, hello, Vicky. Thank you for inviting me to your show. Hello, dear spectators. I took part for the first time in my life at the Petersburg Economic Forum. And before, of course, I had read Western mass media that some poor Russian guys completely isolated from the rest of the world want to try to do something. But my personal impression at the Petersburg Economic Forum was the other way around. Some Western countries isolated themselves from the rest of the world, and the rest of the world was fiercely presented in Petersburg.
We hear a lot about the World Economic Forum, and now we have the Economic Forum in St. Petersburg. Do you think it's a counter event of this World Economic Forum, what took place in Davos? Because they were talking about politics and kind of how to change the world, fight misinformation. But what I saw in your videos was actually like a real convention for economic experiences, pioneering in engineering and all that stuff. So how did it look like for you?
Yeah, this Petersburg Economic Forum is a very interesting combination of a leading trade fair, as we know it from Germany. You know, in former times, Germany was the place number one in the world for trade fairs. For example, Düsseldorf, Munich. It was at the same level as a trade fair, and at the same time, it was a political forum, not only with Vladimir Putin delivering a speech, but there are some halls on these premises, and there always were going on some very interesting discussions between ordinary small Russian enterprise, big oligarchs like Mordashov, for example, and also political leaders like Mrs. Zakharova or Mr. Dugin also took part in this meeting. A very interesting combination of management, economy, and politics at one place. And participants were coming from 139 countries. It's very interesting to mention. Because as I had started before, allegedly isolated Russia from all over the world met with itself, yeah?
Yeah.
in Petersburg. But remember, we have 195 or 196 countries on our planet, and 139 of them participated. So 3/4 of the world participated in St. Petersburg, and only 1/4 of the world did not participate. So, and this 1/4 of the world, the G7, mostly and their allies or satellites or vessels, they spread through mass media because they control mass media in the West, that they were the center of the world. But I saw with my own eyes, I heard with my own ears that the opposite is true.
So you were actually saying that the G7 states and his satellite states is actually stepping away from trademarking with the world, but they try to make it look like that they separated the small Russian and his allies community from the world. So it's totally a fake idea of what's really going on.
Yeah, it's the West is on the loser path. Maybe you sometimes also listen as regards military or political questions. I regularly listen to Scott Ritter or to Douglas McGregor. They always point out that on the military and on the political global scene, the West is losing. Now, what I can add, or on the basis of my personal experience, I have been there for 4 days, that the West is going to lose economically as well. So 3/4 of the world were presented at this forum. Only 1/4 of the world did not join. And the G7, the center of the decaying West, now makes up only for 30% of the world domestic product. But the BRICS countries now make up for nearly 33 or 34% of the world domestic product. So the so-called pariah states, Russia, China, now of course supported by Iran, North Korea, and by the global South, they are on the winning path. They are developing, and the West is decaying. So the opposite is true. What people are disinformed or lied at by Western mass media.
So do you think, because you mentioned that Russia is allying with China, North Korea, and we hear, especially in the US, that that's actually the bad third axis. Like those three countries are the doomsday bringing countries. But now you mentioned they make 43% of the world.
34%.
34 of the world's economical goods. So do you think they are uprising, and this mentioning of marking them, framing them as the bad enemy and the bad players in the country, they try to let the people in America and in Europe think about they are still on the power track, but actually they are losing?
Yes, really. I think it's very important that more and more people in the West are listening, for example, to our program, to the other programs I have mentioned. The West is losing, and the West himself forged this so-called alliance of evil, this axis of evil. This axis of evil, okay, it's a point of view of the West, was forged by the West himself. Nobody knows, because I have been doing business between Germany and Russia, and also partly with the United States now for 28 years. I have listened carefully to what Putin said, told to us 20, 25 years ago, still 10 years ago. The Russians were nearly begging for being integrated into the West. They opened their market completely for the West. They invited Western investors. I have never seen such an openness in a third country towards the West as it was until the year of 2007. Yeah, and that is when Vladimir Putin, or 2008, delivered his famous speech at the Munich Security Conference, where he told them, "We want to cooperate with you, but you don't treat us properly. We come to you with open hands, and you move the NATO against us with some kind of aim to attack Russia potentially in the future." So the West himself brought about this situation by his own stupid behavior, and Russia is now defending. Okay, I think it doesn't surprise anybody. And that Russia was forced into the embracement of China and was forced into the support by North Korea and Iran. It's also a result of the stupid Western behavior towards Russia during the last decades.
Especially when you hear, you heard probably the interview with Tucker Carlson and Putin. That was very, that shocked a little bit in the US when they heard, oh God, Tucker Carlson goes to Russia and talks with Putin. But Putin mentioned in this interview a very, very interesting point, that he even tried to be a part of the NATO. And then the American side of the NATO said, no, we can't do that. That's not possible. So you see that they don't even want to start this potential Cold War 2.0 scenario again. So do you think there's any kind of way that this escalation, what we see right now in Ukraine, could be solved easily with economical strategy again, to say, hey, we don't have to like each other, but we can still do trade working and do a kind of a economical ground zero kind of situation?
Yeah, it would be nice if it were so, but the West has no intention to do so. And okay, who is the West? Okay, let's start with defining who's the West. Unfortunately, there are some usurpers of power, of course, in the United States, and they have their vessels all over Europe, who usurp power from the peoples. I don't see any representation of the interest of the American people by the guys on Capitol Hill. Nothing.
Yeah.
Or by this strange strange old man in the White House. They do not represent at all, nor the interest, neither the will of the American people. Usually American people, they want to have a good living, they want to have a better living for their children, they want to survive, they want to have fun in life. Yeah? But what these power structures in Washington, as regard them, they are completely isolated from the will of the people. They are working for the financial American system. Everybody knows that the Federal Reserve Bank is owned by private family clients, and these private family clients, they dictate the policy of the United States, and further on they dictate the policy of the puppets in Berlin, in Brussels, and in Rome, and so on. That is what everything is about. The real West, the usual people, is good, but this representation of the West by these evil, dark political structures, this is not the West. So being a German, and you know me for some years, I'm really a radical Democrat in the good sense of the word. I'm a radical Democrat. I want to have every decision taken by the people, not by politicians. Yeah, and this confrontation will only end if people and all the peoples of the West really get aware how they are betrayed by their own political leaders, and that they must get rid of their political leaders. I'm only repeating here what has been heard all the time by Scott Ritter or Douglas McGregor.
Yeah, and as you know, we have the big election this year in November in the US, and now we have Donald Trump persecuted and found guilty in a smear campaign court file. Can you tell me a little bit about what you heard in Russian media about that? Because this is kind of a filter in the US. We don't really know how TASS or something is reporting about those topics. But I think that's very interesting for the Russian people also to know who is actually going to rule over America after November.
You know, now I'm telling you some things that maybe nobody in the West who does not have the access to Russian original sources won't believe me. First, Russian television news always they endure 60 minutes every evening, and more than 2 hours at Sundays. It's much more than, for example, in Germany, where you are presented something within 15 minutes. And during these 60 minutes or 120 minutes, it's always happening the same. Russians show what is going on in the West, then they tell what their opinion is about it, and then they draw the conclusion. This is real journalism. And this is journalism in evil, in inverted commas, evil Russian state media. Yeah, they present the point of view of Biden, they present the point of view of Trump, and they make their own, they draw their own conclusion and present it to the spectators. Of course, there is a tendency when they draw the conclusion, but before they show both sides. And this I haven't seen anymore, neither in German nor in American mass media for decades. This you can see in America only at Fox News to some extent, or in channels like yours, or in the channels where these honorable gentlemen present their thoughts, like Tucker Carlson, Douglas McGregor, Scott Ritter. Yeah, so it's unbelievable for people who do not have the opportunity in Russian language to listen to the original, but that is how it is. The Russians always present both sides before drawing a conclusion.
Maybe you should learn a little bit more from Russian media. I probably get censored now, but I think that's a good idea because I have this experience too, because we love to feed our bubble in media on both sides. Like we have the one bubble, the other bubble, but we never actually try to give the other side a chance to listening to, because it's so divided. I think it's very important to have both sides of the aisle in media. And as you said, you see that especially in Russia, which is for us Western people who always got the this narrative, the Russians are only producing their own agenda, their own narrative, their own misinformation for letting the West look bad. So do you think that right now the Russian media is actually the real media doing their job and not feeding only the bubble?
There is no real media nowhere, yeah, because each media is financed by somebody, represents the interest of somebody. So for 100%, real objective media doesn't exist nowhere. But when we compare, you are more competent in comparing. I think American media. I'm more competent in comparing German official media with Russian media. Uh, there I can give you really an example. If we take 0% as only lying, or 100% as only telling the truth, Russian state media is at a level of about 80% because they always present both sides. And German media is somewhere between 0 and 10% because they do not at all present both sides. They only brainwash you with their conclusion.
Yeah, and I think that's very good to point out that actually the Western um, government and media is more playing like what we used to think it's happening in Eastern countries, like in the late 80s, and when the Cold War was going on, like Eastern Germany, where the media was totally controlled and only propaganda unit. Can you tell me, so going back to the economic forum in St. Petersburg, can you tell me about some inventions what impressed you the most? Like we don't know what they're doing over in Russia and what they invent in Iran and all that stuff. So that would be very interesting for us to see. Okay, it's not just a black hole there and nothing is going on. No, they are actually inventive there.
Yeah, the Russians are very innovative. Russians always have been innovative during the Cold War, but they didn't have the technology, necessary technology to convert innovation into something useful. Now they have access to technology. They have had access to Western technology. Now they have access to Chinese Asian technology, which is more and more replacing Western technology. So Russia is now in a very favorable situation that they can now convert their. It seems to me when they are born with the innovation mindset, the Russians really, and I have seen it, for example, and I made some videos for you. For example, Rus robot, Russian robot. They produce their own robots for mechanical engineering. They write their own software to steer the robots, and they combine it with their own ERP system, so enterprise resource planning system. This is some kind of autarky, or what is it called in English? No idea. So it was very impressive for me to visit the stand, for example, of Rus robot and other stands. They build their own vessels, their own ships. They build now their own planes, which are really leading now in technologically, because you see what is happening to Boeing.
Yeah.
Boeing is, we know why it is so, because the controllers squeezed out the money for the sake of the shareholders of Boeing. They stopped investing into security. Russians do not work this way. Russians always invest into security before they pay out to their shareholders. That is why Russian planes are now becoming and more modern and more secure than Boeing planes. Imagine, yeah, very impressive.
Yeah, but is there actually still like an embargo going on that Russia is not allowed to sell their products? Like we heard about Nord Stream, and everyone has their own conspiracy about what happened with Nord Stream pipeline. But is there actual a chance for Russian investors to sell their products in Western countries, or they just really build up this invisible wall for the markets?
The invisible wall was now built by the West.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's very interesting. You made a comparison some minutes ago between during the Cold War, the Berlin Wall, the wall between the West and the East. Back then the wall was built by the East. Now the wall has been built by the West. And when I come back, that 3/4 of the world were presented at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. Russia has no problems to sell to these 3/4 of the world their own products, their machinery, their planes, their technology, not only resources like oil and gas. and Russia doesn't need the West anymore. It has command of the markets of 3/4 of the world, and these 3/4 of the world are mostly now the new Asian tiger states, like China, Vietnam, for example, and the former colonies of the West in Africa. And this is a very interesting global development, that these poor countries, they had been suppressed, exploited, misguided by the English, French, mostly colonial powers for 500 years. These countries are so happy now that they have won an alternative, that they do not have to buy anything always in the West, because now China has emerged, Russia now is emerging also as a producer of very interesting technology. And so on the global scene, the West has already lost this global war. It can't win it anymore. And the West is guilty himself or itself, because he did everything to bring this about. What is happening now?
Yeah, and then the intention is a big question too, because when you think, why would the West risk their infrastructural powers with playing this little war game with Russia, and then seeing in the end, yeah, we are actually just get outsourced, because that sounds like it is like they outsource the West, and then they just they build around the West their own ecosystem and their own trade market. And what you mentioned with Africa, we hear a totally other story, that Russia and China is economically invading Africa now, and they suffer totally. So that's a very interesting way to frame it from the Western side. Because what you mentioned, it sounds actually very helpful and fulfilling for the African countries to have the chance to have an alternative to the West.
Yeah, that's a complete lie. What is Western mass media here spreading about the Africans finally got the chance, and they took the chance to kick out American and French troops out of Africa. And they're welcoming the Russians and the Chinese because they see them as liberators after this long-term Western oppression. That is how they see it.
That's interesting, because we had this incident in Niger where the Congress was talking about that Niger is so escalated, has such a big escalation that the American troops had to leave because they couldn't even provide medical health there for their own soldiers, and don't get any mail anymore. So it's kind of a total 180 switch, what we hear right now, because it looks like that the West is now the East, what we have known about the Cold War.
Yeah, and that's it really. When I go back into my family history, my father fled from GDR. So my father fled Eastern Germany. That is why I was born in Western Germany. I was grown up completely anti-Russian, anti-Soviet in Western German schools. So the narratives here were completely pro-West and anti-East. But I'm comparing what is going on now to my personal experience when I was young. And I see all these oppressing political opposition, brainwashing people by propaganda, no more journalism in mass media, putting political opponents into jail, what is now going on by this side of the Biden administration with Donald Trump. That is what I remember from my youth, typical Soviet. But this is now being done by the West. You don't see it in Russia to this extent.
Yeah, and they frame that Putin and the Chinese have their hands in that. They are the secret puppet players behind all that. And do you think that's also just an excuse for the increasing power of the West, and actually
decreasing power, you mean, of the West?
Yeah, decreasing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the decreasing power. Like it sounds like the Western states have their they already on the peak of the mountain of power right now, and now they are just can go down. So there is no climbing up anymore, like you saw in the Roman empires and all that stuff. So it looks kind of that. Do you have the same experience?
Yeah, thank you very much for this historic analogy. The West had the peak behind himself already for decades. When you compare to the Western European Empire collapsed in 476, but the end was already looming from the horizon some decades before. That is now what is happening to the American Empire. And the only chance to preserve a part of their former full hegemony of the world is to build now this wall around the last Western states, to build now a wall around this G7 core, to build a wall around Northern America and Western Europe, and hoping to control at least the remaining 1/4 of the world they still can influence. Because as we have already mentioned before, 3/4 have now got out of their control. But this is also a very dangerous situation, because every empire in decay is very doesn't know its frontiers. It's very they tend to hazardous behavior, as we saw it when by the will of Washington, the Ukrainians attacked the Russian radio station near Krasnodar 3 weeks ago, which is very necessary for the Russians to defend themselves against potential rocket launch by intercontinental missiles from the United States. So this is very hazardous. Has become very dangerous, and I understand why the empire in decay is now behaving this way, because nobody knows, or a few people know, that 50 years ago Henry Kissinger tied the US dollar to Saudi Arabian oil. That oil throughout the world had to be, or could be sold only for its dollars, the so-called petrodollar system. That is what stabilized the US hegemony over the world. But this contract expired the 9th of June this year. This contract has expired after 50 years. It was not prolonged by the Saudis, and the Saudis turned their back to the West and joined the BRICS. So the American empire has already lost. And now we will hope, for the sake of the world, that they won't go anymore for these hazardous movements like striking Russian defensive, not offensive, defensive radio stations, now allowing the Ukrainians to strike with their missiles Russia. But these are not the Ukrainians who are striking. These are NATO soldiers, because these technological weapons can be used, can be managed by the Ukrainians. They are too complicated. This has to be done by Western soldiers. So the NATO is in an active war against Russia. So please wake up. And I do not meddle in American politics. This is the affair of the American people. But being as a German, I can only tell now my German counterfellows: wake up. Who governs you? Wake up. Who abuses you in a war against Russia? And Russia is not an offensive power. That's not true. We can read in Western mass media all the days. When he has finished with the Ukraine, Mr. Putin will go further to the Baltic states, to Poland. Apart from permanent propaganda in Western mass media, there is no single reason for this. Russia has started the war in the Ukraine because it had not been granted security guarantees by the NATO after the extension of NATO towards Russian frontiers. That is the reason of the war.
Yeah, and there was the contract that the NATO is not expanding more east. Like Ukraine should have not been ever in a discussion of getting an ally of NATO or a member of NATO. And now they're saying they want to make Ukraine a NATO member. So having that said, it sounds like that we can actually draw a very interesting picture about the West. It's like the the wolf, which is close to the edge, and it only can react with aggression to.
That's it.
And I think you mentioned or you described it very well, because already the Western has lost economically and in power over others parts of the world. And now with losing the petrol dollar, so there is a kind of a loss of power in dictating how the oil prices can go. Do you think that attacking Russia now with NATO missiles and claiming, "Oh, we will allow Ukraine to attack Russia with NATO weapons," and also making armies prepared, like Macron is saying that all way long, and we also hear that from generals in the German Bundeswehr, that we want to be war prepared till 2029. Like this is
Yes.
in 5 years. So they are literally promoting the Third World War with
Yeah.
and what do you think is their intention? Because you need money, you need logistics to fight a war, and if the West is already lost all his ability to gain this money for paying war, is this just a kind of illusion what they try, or do they really think they can rip out Russia with what missiles they have, and they don't think that Russia has the ability to increase their military
Mhm.
power and inventions?
Now let's draw some conclusion. Yeah, first, the West has already lost on the geopolitical scene. He is isolated himself from 3/4 of the world. The West is going to lose economically. The G7 is in decline. The BRICS is rising. As regards on the battlefield, the West also has already lost the war. The Ukraine has now lost more than 500,000 soldiers dead. And this is the responsibility of the West, because the West equipped the Ukraine and sent the Ukraine as in this proxy war against Russia. And that Russia started this war does not contradict this reason, because before Russia started the war, the Ukraine had been equipped, trained, and soaked into the West as this potential aggression towards Russia over a decade, more or less. Yeah. So, and militarily, the West has already lost, and now the final stage of the de-dollarization of the world has started the 9th of June. And the West cannot win, and all the bloodshed is at the expense of the West. And really, for humanity, for a more safe life, especially on the European soil, I think every normally thinking person is hoping to Russian victory, and the quicker it comes, the better it will be, because it will first stop the bloodshed, then second bring stability to Europe again, and open the doors again for Western European Russian economic cooperation. And without this cooperation, Western Europe will die economically. So it is not Russia that needs the West anymore. It are the Western European countries that now need Russia in order to survive.
So do you think with now having the elections in Europe with the European Parliament, do you think there is with the people who are voted in right now or who gonna bring the parliament together, do you think there will be a change in the mindset of handling the situation and going a little bit closer to Russia, or do you think they're gonna even more play that game with, no, we are powerful, we are the West, we have to fight against the Russians?
That won't change anything, as you mentioned it on your own. When the predator or the wolf has been pressed towards the abyss before falling down and dying, the wolf can only try to tear with him the rest into the abyss or to bite around. That is the only thing that now will happen, unfortunately, in my expectation.
It doesn't really sound really hopeful.
Now, Does not. Sorry.
No. So do you think just like making a hypothetical might think. So, do you think when Donald J. Trump get reelected and he's back in office and he says he could stop the war in Russia and Ukraine in one phone call? Do you think that's
Mhm.
gonna that's literally happening that he has that power? But just to think what power he actually has, because what can he do? He can pull back American troops out of Eastern Europe and Western Europe, but there are still the aggressions from the Western European countries. So, do you think really that he has that power to stop it only with one phone call?
No, I'm so sorry now towards the end of our interview to becoming more and more negative, yeah, as being a preserving a realistic view on the situation. First, Donald Trump has to survive until the elections. The first thing, remember what happened to Kennedy.
Yeah.
First, he has to survive. Second, he has to be elected. Remember what happened 4 years ago when suddenly before reaching the finish line, some very strange votes of dead people and not existing letter votes then shifted victory from Donald Trump to Joe Biden. That's the second obstacle he has to pass over. Yeah? And then only will arise this question. And I think Donald Trump, being a realistic politician, and Vladimir Putin, they will come to terms. But you already mentioned who will then be the biggest opponents of a deal. This will be the Western European leaders. And now, please, let's compare what happened after the Berlin Wall has fallen in 1989. Who were the biggest opponents? These were the leaders of the communist parties of Poland, of Hungary, of Czechoslovakia. So the vassals of Moscow then became the biggest opponents against this very nice period of time of smooth relations between the West and the East. And it will happen the same thing the other way around, the same way the other way around. Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, they can come to terms, and then all these Scholz, later on maybe Pistorius, new chancellor in Germany, Marine Le Pen, she's not better, Macron, all Maloney in Italy, all these vessels of the decaying US empire in Europe, they will be the last opponents then against this new deal of peace between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, because they're losing their power. So there are still some obstacles to come that have to be overcome.
Yeah, and we hope that so in America, a lot of people hope that Trump will be reelected and change a lot of things. So, just for our audience, how is the life in Russia? Because we have all those ideas that you get at a kind of Eastern Germany kind of vibe with people are spying you out and all that stuff. So that's you can totally live free in Russia.
There is one thing you should not do in Russia, really. You should not go to the Red Square and shout there that Putin were a criminal. This you should not do. Yeah. But that's it. That's it. As long as you do not oppose the system, you can completely live freely in Russia. You can be homosexual, heterosexual, or gay. So it's another lie.
Yeah.
There is no law that prohibits gay in Russia, nothing. It's only prohibited to brainwash children in school with gay ideology. But every young Russian guy has the right to choose for himself whether he wants to marry a woman or a man who wants to live a gay life. As Putin puts it some time ago, it does not interest him what people do in their private sector. And that is the big difference. Western Germany has now become a more evil, a more brutal copy of former Eastern Germany. Spying, neighbors, slandering, hell a lot of sanctions by you in the night, you are woken, the police wake you up, search everything, take everything with you, with them, yeah, all your money, computer, mobile phone. So Western Germany now has become a copy of Eastern Germany, but now with a more modern technology of spying and oppressing people, of oppressing free speech, of censorship. Nothing of them I can see here in Russia. Once again, as long as I do not criticize the system, but I have no intention to criticize the system, because women can go out at night, they won't stabbed by people from third countries, they won't be raped by people from third countries. Everything is clean in Moscow. You can say what you think, free speech, a very good life. So nowadays Russia reminds me of the former good life I had 40 years ago in West Germany, which has unfortunately disappeared. That's it.
That's it. I saw that too in Germany. We were together. We saw that together when the downfall came, 2020. And so do you think there is any way to overcome this in a peaceful way, or do you think it has to escalate and then we have to go to status quo?
The empire in decay, unfortunately, does not lose its grip on Western Europe. Unfortunately not. So therefore, the only solution is a bloody solution. It will come only via Russian victory, which will be the precondition for establishing free life again in Western Europe. That's it. Maybe it's now the conclusion, because we're now on air now for 45 minutes.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.